Today's case began on January 2nd, 1935 at 1:20 p.m. when a 25-year-old looking young man named Roland Owen was admitted to the President Hotel in Kansas City, Missouri. Roland was alone, and although he was wearing a well-tailored suit, he had no suitcase or backpack with him, just a black coat, a comb, and a toothbrush in his hands. His face had distinguishable features, such as slightly deformed ears like those of boxers, and a scar on the left side of his head. Roland requested a room without a view of the street and on one of the highest floors of the hotel, and only one room was available, room 1046, on the 10th floor. No one took into account the man's peculiar manner, as the hotel was already well known for hosting business travelers looking for nightly company. The next day, January 3rd, around noon, the maid Mary Soptic appeared to do the daily cleaning and found the door was left half open.
Room service, can I come in?
I'm still in the room. Can you come back another time, please?
Sorry, sir, but I need to clean up. I'm already a little late. This is the last quarter on my list. I won't be long.
Oh, okay. Come on in then.
Upon entering, Mary saw Roland sitting on the edge of the made bed. She didn't know if he had already organized everything, or if he had just slept on top of the sheets and woken up. The curtains were closed, and only one lamp was left on. As Mary cleaned, Roland continued to sit on the bed, but he warned her.
When you leave the door unlocked, please. I have a friend coming to visit me this afternoon.
At 4 p.m. Mary returned, but this time to change towels. Once again, the door was unlocked and Roland was still in bed, but this time he was asleep on the made bed and dressed from head to toe. During the exchange, Mary saw a paper on the nightstand that said, "Don, I'll be back in 15 minutes. Wait for me." Mary assumed that the man staying in the room was this Don, and that the one who had left the note was the friend he was expecting to visit. On the 4th, at 10:30 a.m., returning to do her daily work, Mary found the door locked and imagined Roland had finally left, but when she opened it, she saw the same man from the day before sitting in the chair in the corner of the completely dark room. She decided not to say anything and just started cleaning so she could get out of there as soon as possible. While she was cleaning, the phone rang.
Hello? No thanks. I already had my breakfast. No, Dom, please. I'm not hungry. Okay, thanks.
Mary found it strange for the guest to speak to someone named Don, as the day before she had seen a note for someone with the same name. She had assumed that the note was made by that friend of the guest's, but when she heard him talking to Don on the phone, she couldn't understand any of it. Why would the guest leave a note for someone, notifying him that he would return in 15 minutes, if he was already in the room sleeping? The situation was getting more and more awkward. A few minutes later, Roland started talking to Mary, asking all sorts of probing questions. What sort of money do the maids make? How many rooms do they clean every day? Could guests live long-term in this hotel? He also complained about the prices of other hotels in the region. She answered the questions, even though she found it all quite weird. On the way out, she noticed that the door had been locked from the outside. That is, someone had locked the guest inside the room. During the afternoon, when the towels were to be changed again, she knocked on the door to inform Roland that she was going in, and someone else answered.
Sir, it's me again. I've come to change towels.
We don't need a towel now. Come back later.
Later that night, at around 11, a taxi driver named Robert Lane saw a man walking down the street wearing only pants and a very thin shirt, despite the cold that night. This man was the guest in room 1046.
Good evening, friend. Are you okay with the Lord?
Can you take me to the President Hotel, please?
Upon entering the car, the driver noticed that Roland was bleeding on his arm, in addition to having many bruises on his body. During the journey, the only thing that Roland said was,
"I'll get this over with. Tomorrow."
The following morning, January 5th, two things happened. Guest Jean Owen, who was staying in 1048, the room next door, heard raised voices coming from room 1046, as well as crying that sounded like a woman's. She thought about calling the reception, but decided not to because the crying didn't last very long. On the same floor, a call girl who was meeting a client in apartment 1026 heard the noise of things being dropped inside room 1046, as well as some moans of pain, sounds as if someone was struggling. After that, absolute silence. At 8:30 a.m., the hotel reception received a call from the telephone operator informing them that the telephone in 1046 had been off the hook for quite a long time. This happened in 1935, when telephone systems were very different from the ones we know today. At the time, there were telephone exchanges that monitored the lines, received calls from users, and then the operator would connect them to their desired destinations. An employee went into the room to warn Roland about the phone. Although the doorknob carried a "Do Not Disturb" sign, he knocked on the door.
Come in. Come in.
Sir, the door is locked. Your phone is off hook. Could you put it back on, please? Sir, just put the phone back on the hook, please. Thanks.
Almost 2 hours later, the phone company called again and said the phone was still off the hook. The hotel decided to send another employee, this time with a master key. When the employee entered the room, the setting was like a horror movie. There was blood all over the floor, all over the wall, and all over the ceiling. Roland was in the bathroom, unclothed, on his knees. He was critically injured, with his head resting against the side of the tub. But he was still alive. Desperate, the employee called the police, who arrived at the hotel in just a few minutes. When they asked who had done this to him, Roland simply replied,
Nobody. I fell here in the bathroom.
Roland died on his way to the hospital, succumbing to his injuries. The hotel did not record the entry of its visitors, and because of this, it was not possible to identify who could have been responsible for this crime. For the police, nothing made sense. The only things they found were a fingerprint on the phone, which in the end could not be identified, as well as a hair clip, a cigarette butt, a tie, a broken glass, a trash bucket that had been used to burn papers, and in the bathroom, a bottle of diluted sulfuric acid. In the course of the investigations, it was discovered that the name Roland Owen did not exist. As the case became known, with the guest's photo stamped in all the newspapers, several people claimed to have found him days or weeks before the crime. However, on each occasion, the guest presented himself with a different name. A hotel located on the same block as the President Hotel claimed to the police that a man like the one in the photo had stayed there for one night on January 1st under the name Eugene Scott. But there's only one problem. No local with that name existed either. Without any information that would unravel the crime or at least identify the guest in room 1046, the police finally decided that the body should be buried in an unmarked grave as a pauper. This was announced in the newspapers, and the next day, a delivery man left a bouquet of roses in a local newspaper and handed it to the police. With it was a handwritten note that said that the flowers were to be placed next to the casket, as well as a cash sum of $200 for funeral expenses. Today, this would be worth about $3,800. Whoever wrote the note wrote that the deceased's name was David Brzezinski, signing the note with the words, "Eternal Love, Louise." The police were unable to discover the origin of this donation, nor who this Louise was. In search of information about David Brzezinski, the police found only one citizen in Salt Lake City, but he died in a railway accident 15 years earlier. They also didn't find out who Don was, or the identity of anyone else who visited the guest in room 1046. With no further information to go off of, the case was dropped. In 1936, a woman from Alabama who identified herself as Eleanor Ogletree contacted the police.
Look, I read an article about this guy named Roland in the American Weekly magazine, and I think he's my brother, but that isn't his name. He's called Artemis Ogletree. He's been missing since April 34. My mother and I have been getting typewritten letters from someone claiming to be Artemis, saying that he was working and that he planned to visit Europe. But this is strange since he doesn't know how to write, and he never got in touch again.
A few days later, someone else called. A man who said his name was Jordan.
This man is called Artemis. I met him in Egypt. He saved my life in Cairo in 1930. I have a picture of him there in the pyramids. I'll send it to you.
In the photos, the resemblance between him and the guest is striking. Jordan never got in touch again, nor were the police able to return the call. For years to come, authorities continued to look for clues, but nothing more was discovered. Now we're going to take a leap of practically 3 generations. In 2003, nearly 70 years later, John Horner, a Kansas librarian who had written a story about the case 3 years earlier, got a call.
John, I'd rather not say my name, but look, I'm a construction worker. In one of the houses I'm working on, I found a box in the attic with stuff in it that I think would interest you.
Inside the box was a pile of information, clippings, photographs, and published articles about the mystery of room 1046, which had been put together over the years and painstakingly organised in a very professional manner. The box included photos of the crime scene and the autopsy. This caught the attention of John, who had never seen such complete material on the mystery. He concluded that the owner was likely a police officer who continued to research the case for years to come. In addition to all this material, a theory about the case had been written in a typewritten letter with impeccable grammar. The document relates a possible romance between the guest of room 1046 and a girl named Louise, the Louise who sent the note and money to help with the funeral. This Louise would have been the wife of some criminal, politician, or influential businessman who would have found the victim and had him tortured and brutally killed in front of his mistress. Is this just a theory, with so many details still up in the air? Who was Don? Who was Jordan? Whose were the voices of the man and woman in room 1046? Whose fingerprint was found on the phone? Why did he always introduce himself with different names? In the end, despite the victim apparently being identified as Artemis Ogletree, the mystery surrounding the whole case remains unsolved and unexplained to this day.